You're not welcome here. Go away, my son's bride declared at their wedding rehearsal dinner, her voice cutting through the Chicago rooftop terrace. 60 guests watched as the woman in the dress I bought expelled me from the celebration I funded. My ex-wife Linda smiled triumphantly while my son chose silence over defending his father. They thought Ryan Caldwell would quietly disappear into the night. But did they really believe a man who built an empire from nothing would accept defeat so easily? By morning, their dream wedding would become their worst nightmare. The question wasn't whether I would get revenge. It was how completely I would destroy everything they thought was theirs. Before I reveal the devastating evidence I found that destroyed them both, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and let me know if you think they got what they deserved or if I went too far. I never imagined that the proudest moment of my life would turn into the most humiliating. Standing on the rooftop terrace of Chicago's most exclusive restaurant, surrounded by 60 guests, I watched my son Michael's rehearsal dinner unfold like a perfect dream. The city lights twinkled below champagne glasses, caught the evening glow, and laughter filled the air. Sarah looked radiant in her designer dress, the one I had quietly paid for. She stood beside Michael, preparing what I assumed would be a heartfelt thank you speech. My chest swelled with pride. Despite the divorce, we were finally coming together as a family. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, Sarah began, her voice carrying across the terrace. The conversations died down. This has been such a journey for Michael and me. I smiled, raising my champagne glass in anticipation. Then Sarah's eyes found mine, and something cold flickered in them. But before we celebrate, she continued, her voice taking on a sharper edge, I think it's important to address something that's been weighing on my heart. The terrace fell silent. Michael and I have talked extensively about toxic relationships. My smile faltered. Something was wrong. Sarah's gaze never left mine. Now I understand why Linda left you, Ryan. You're emotionally unavailable and controlling. Michael deserves better than your toxic influence. Her words hit like physical blows. You think throwing money around makes you a father, but real love isn't about writing checks. You've spent 30 years trying to buy love because you're incapable of earning it. That's why your marriage failed. That's why Michael came to me for real guidance instead of his pathetic excuse for a father. 60 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me. The warm evening air suddenly felt suffocating. Sarah, please, Michael started weakly. No, Michael, we discussed this. She stepped forward, her voice growing more vicious. Ryan, you're a lonely, bitter man who destroys everything he touches. You're the reason this family fell apart in the first place. You're not welcome here. Get out. The terrace was dead silent. I could hear my heartbeat pounding. Then I saw her. Linda. My ex-wife stepped out from behind the guests, a triumphant smile on her face. She had been here all along, waiting for this moment. Sarah's absolutely right, Linda said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Michael finally found someone who can see through your manipulation, Ryan. Someone who won't enable your controlling narcissistic behavior like I did for 20 years. The world tilted. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned, coordinated, a calculated assassination of my character. I stood frozen as whispers rippled through the crowd. Some guests looked away in embarrassment. Others seemed entertained by the drama. My son stared at the floor, saying nothing, doing nothing, just like always when things got difficult. Then Michael finally spoke, and his words cut deeper than anything Sarah had said. Dad, he said quietly, not even looking at me, you're not welcome here. Just go. The dismissal from my own son was the final blow. Complete, public, devastating. I set my champagne glass down with a hand that barely trembled. Of 30 years of fatherhood, 5 years of rebuilding after the divorce, months of planning this perfect wedding, all destroyed in 4 minutes of calculated cruelty. Without a word, I walked toward the elevator. Behind me, Sarah's voice resumed its sweet tone, redirecting attention back to celebration. As if nothing had happened. As if they hadn't just destroyed me in front of everyone who mattered. The elevator doors closed. As the floors ticked by, something began to replace the shock and humiliation. Rage, cold calculating rage. They thought they could humiliate me and still enjoy the fairy tale wedding I was funding. They thought I would quietly disappear and continue paying for their happiness while they celebrated my destruction. They were about to learn how catastrophically wrong they were. The drive through Chicago's downtown streets felt like traveling through a nightmare. Red lights blurred past my windshield as I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white against the leather. Every block reminded me of something I had built, something that suddenly felt meaningless after what had just happened. 28 years ago, I held Michael in my arms for the first time in Northwestern Memorial Hospital, just 6 blocks from here. I remembered whispering promises to that tiny baby. I would give him everything. I would be the father I never had. And I had kept those promises. Every single one. When Linda left 5 years ago, claiming I was emotionally distant, I threw myself into being both mother and father to Michael. I attended every milestone, quietly paid his rent. For 8 months, helped him buy Sarah's engagement ring when his savings fell short. Sarah's words echoed like poison. Pathetic excuse for a father. You're not welcome here. But it was Michael's voice that hurt most. Just go. My own son. The boy I had sacrificed everything for. Everything I did was for him, and he had just publicly disowned me without hesitation. I pulled into my building's underground garage, the concrete walls closing around me like a tomb. The elevator to the 42nd floor felt endless. When the doors opened to my penthouse, the space felt different, emptier. The floor-to-ceiling windows that usually showcased the glittering city now felt like barriers. I poured 3 fingers of 25-year-old scotch and stood at those windows. Somewhere out there, Sarah and Linda were probably celebrating their successful ambush. Somewhere out there, my son was being consoled by the woman who had just destroyed his father. The scotch burned, but not as much as the realization that I had been played. This wasn't spontaneous. Linda's perfectly timed entrance, the coordinated attack, it had all been planned. They had used my love for Michael as a weapon against me. I walked to my home office and sat behind the mahogany desk that had witnessed 1,000 business deals. The wedding folder sat in the center, thick with contracts and receipts. Every vendor, every service, every detail of Michael and Sarah's dream wedding had my name on it, my signature, my money, $87,000. That's what I had spent so far on their fairy tale. The venue alone cost $35,000, the flowers $12,000, the photographer $8,000, the catering $22,000, plus Sarah's dress, the rehearsal dinner, the honeymoon I had secretly booked in Tuscany. I opened my laptop and pulled up the vendor contact list. 43 different suppliers, all expecting payment, all contracted under my name. They thought they could humiliate me and still dance at the wedding I was funding. They thought I would quietly retreat and continue bankrolling their celebration while they laughed about my destruction. They had gravely underestimated Ryan Caldwell. I reached for my phone and scrolled to the first contact. Millennium Park Event Center, the venue where in 18 hours Michael and Sarah expected to say their vows in front of 200 guests. My finger hovered over the call button for exactly 3 seconds. Then I dialed. Millennium Park Event Center, this is Jessica speaking. The voice was cheerful, professional, completely unaware that she was about to witness the systematic destruction of a fairy tale. This is Ryan Caldwell. I'm the contract holder for the Caldwell-Whitaker wedding this Saturday. I'm calling to cancel the event effective immediately. Silence. Then, I'm sorry, sir, did you say cancel? That's correct. I want the venue canceled, all services terminated, and the space released. But sir, the wedding is this Saturday. That's only 5 days away. Are you absolutely certain? I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I hung up and dialed the next number. Enchanted Florals. This is Ryan Caldwell regarding the Caldwell-Whitaker wedding this Saturday. I need to cancel all floral arrangements immediately. Mr. Caldwell, but we've already ordered all the specialty flowers from our suppliers. Then cancel those orders. The wedding is canceled. I moved methodically through my list. Premier Catering Solutions, the photographer, the string quartet, the bartending service. Each conversation followed the same pattern: shock confusion, desperate attempts to salvage the situation, and finally resigned acceptance. This is highly unusual, Mr. Caldwell. We've already purchased ingredients for 200 guests. Send me the cancellation fees. I'll pay whatever's required. What should we tell the other vendors everyone's expecting this wedding? Tell them to ask Sarah Whitaker. She'll have plenty to explain. By 2 in the morning, I had made 37 phone calls. The wedding cake designer, the transportation company, the videographer, the lighting technician, even the woman who was supposed to scatter rose petals down the aisle. Each cancellation felt like removing a piece from a carefully constructed house of cards. Sarah and Linda thought they could build their celebration on the foundation of my humiliation. They were about to discover that when you remove the foundation, everything collapses. My phone buzzed with text messages as word spread through the vendor network. Some confused, others angry about the 5-day notice cancellation. A few were surprisingly supportive, once I briefly explained that I was no longer welcome at my own son's wedding. The final call was to Antonio's the Bakery, scheduled to create Sarah's 5-tier dream cake with handcrafted sugar flowers and gold leaf details. Mr. Caldwell, we haven't started the cake yet, but we've ordered all the specialty ingredients. Are you sure you want to cancel? I'm sure. Cancel everything. Send me whatever cancellation fees you require. This is such a shame, sir. We were looking forward to creating something beautiful. Beauty built on lies rarely lasts long anyway. I leaned back in my leather chair, surveying the chaos I had unleashed. 43 vendors, all scrambling to understand why a wedding that was supposed to be the social event of the season had just evaporated 5 days before the ceremony. My computer screen showed emails flooding in, cancellation confirmations, frantic messages from confused suppliers, angry notes from vendors who would lose money on the short notice. But the most satisfying message was the one I hadn't received yet. The phone call from Michael when he discovered that his perfect wedding had become a perfect disaster. As if summoned by my thoughts, my phone began to ring. Michael's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Hello, son. What the hell have you done? Michael's voice cracked with rage and desperation. The venue called Sarah 20 minutes ago. They said you canceled everything, Dad. I remained calm. I canceled what I was paying for. Since I'm not welcome at the wedding, I saw no reason to continue funding it. This is insane. You can't destroy our wedding because you got your feelings hurt. My feelings hurt. The words came out sharper than intended. Michael, your fiancé, called me a pathetic excuse for a father in front of 60 people. You told me to leave. So I'm not welcome, and neither is my money. I could hear Sarah's voice in the background, shrill and panicked. Dad, please. Sarah was just stressed. Wedding planning has been overwhelming. So overwhelming that she coordinated with your mother to publicly humiliate me. This wasn't stress, Michael. This was planned. What are you talking about? Mom wasn't even supposed to be there. Exactly. Linda showed up at the perfect moment to support Sarah's attack. They planned this together, son. Can't you see that? The line went quiet, except for muffled voices. Then Michael returned his tone harder. Sarah says you're being paranoid. She says this is exactly the controlling behavior that drove Mom away. After everything I had sacrificed, my own son was parroting their lies. Michael, who was there for you when your mother left, who paid your rent when you couldn't find work, who helped you buy Sarah's engagement ring. That doesn't give you the right to control our lives. Control, I gave you everything you asked for. All I wanted was basic respect at my own son's wedding. You're being dramatic. Sarah didn't mean what she said. She called me emotionally unavailable, controlling, and a pathetic excuse for a father. Which part didn't she mean? Silence stretched between us. Look, Dad, Sarah loves me. She's protecting our relationship from negative influences. Negative influences? Is that what I am now? You can be intense. Maybe Sarah felt threatened. Threatened by the fact that I was paying for her dream wedding, that I welcomed her into our family. Dad, please, just reinstate everything. We can work this out after the wedding. My son was asking me to fund my own humiliation. No, Michael. What? I will not pay for a wedding where I'm treated like an unwanted stranger. I will not bankroll a celebration that begins with my public destruction. Then you're choosing your pride over your son's happiness. I'm choosing my dignity over enabling your fiancé's cruelty. Fine, Michael exploded. If that's how you want to be, then don't come to the wedding at all. We'll figure out another way. We don't need you or your money. Michael, wait. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the silence pressing in around me. My son had made his choice. Sarah over me. Her lies over my love. But they had made one crucial mistake. They assumed I would quietly retreat and fade into the background. They assumed that Ryan Caldwell, who had built a real estate empire from nothing, would simply accept defeat. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I opened my laptop. If Michael thought they could replace my funding in 5 days, he was delusional. But I had work to do before Saturday. It was time to dig deeper into Sarah Whitaker's background. The next morning, I sat in my office with 3 cups of coffee and steel determination. If Sarah and Linda thought they could orchestrate my destruction, they had underestimated my resources. 25 years in Chicago real estate had taught me that information was power. I started with my credit card statements, something I should have done months ago. The American Express account I had given Michael for wedding emergencies told a horrifying story. March 15th, Cartier, Michigan Avenue, $12,000. A watch I had never seen Michael wear. March 22nd, Nordstrom Oak Street, $8,000. Designer clothes that weren't Michael's style. April 3rd, the Peninsula Hotel, $3,000 for a weekend stay. Michael had told me he was visiting college friends in Milwaukee that weekend. I called American Express directly. Mr. Caldwell, your account has 2 authorized users. Michael Caldwell added in January and Sarah Whitaker added in March. My hand tightened around the phone. I never authorized Sarah Whitaker. The authorization was completed online using your account credentials on March 10th. March 10th. 2 days after Sarah had helped me organize financial documents for wedding planning, she had sat in this office, smiled sweetly, and asked to use my computer to show me Pinterest boards. I immediately called my bank. Jennifer, my personal banker, had disturbing news. Ryan, I was going to call you. There have been unusual large transactions I wanted to verify. A $28,000 wire transfer to Tuscany Dream Vacations last month. Several luxury purchases that seemed out of pattern. The Tuscany honeymoon I thought I had secretly booked was actually Sarah's doing, charged to my account without my knowledge. Jennifer, I need every transaction on all my accounts for the past 6 months. Every single one. I'll have them ready in an hour. At the bank, Jennifer handed me a folder thick with evidence. Designer handbags, jewelry, spa treatments, restaurant bills for places I had never been. A pattern of theft stretching back to February, weeks after Michael announced their engagement. Jennifer, freeze all accounts immediately. Change passwords, remove all authorized users except me. Ryan, if this is fraud, we should report it to authorities. Not yet. I want to handle this my way first. Back home, I spread the bank statements across my dining table like a detective building a case. The evidence was overwhelming. Sarah and Linda hadn't just planned my public humiliation, they had been systematically robbing me. The most damning evidence was a series of transfers to an account registered under Linda's name. 30% of every fraudulent charge had been transferred to my ex-wife. They had a profit-sharing agreement for stealing from me. I called my attorney, Marcus Chen. Marcus, I need to see you immediately, and prepare for a very public confrontation. What kind of confrontation? The kind that happens at weddings when the father of the groom has evidence of systematic fraud by the bride and the mother of the groom. Ryan, we could handle this quietly through the courts. No, they chose to humiliate me publicly. They're going to be exposed publicly. I looked at the evidence spread before me. $87,000 in unauthorized charges. 6 months of systematic theft. A conspiracy between my ex-wife and future daughter-in-law to drain my accounts while destroying my relationship with my son. Saturday was still 3 days away. 3 days for them to believe they had won. 3 days for them to plan whatever makeshift wedding they thought they could pull together. They had no idea that I would be there uninvited, but armed with evidence that would destroy them both in front of everyone they cared about. The hunters were about to become the hunted. Saturday arrived with perfect Chicago weather. Clear skies, gentle breeze, 72 degrees. The kind of day Sarah had probably prayed for. I parked across from Millennium Park Event Center at 11 in the morning, 2 hours before the ceremony. The manila folder beside me contained every fraudulent transaction, every transfer to Linda, every piece of evidence that would destroy their lies. The first guests arrived at 11:30, dressed in wedding finest, carrying gifts and flowers. They approached the venue with smiles, completely unaware they were walking into disaster. I watched the first couple reach the locked doors. They tried the handles, looked confused, pulled out phones. Within minutes, a crowd gathered, all equally bewildered. At noon, Sarah's white Bentley pulled up. She stepped out in a simpler backup dress, Michael emerging looking haggard and stressed. Even from across the street, I could see their panic. Sarah rushed to the entrance, Michael behind her. She pounded on the glass doors, her voice carrying as she shouted at the locked building. The gathered guests watched uncomfortably as their bride had a complete meltdown. A venue employee appeared, unlocking doors from inside. I couldn't hear the conversation, but saw him shaking his head, holding up cancellation documents. Sarah's gestures became frantic, her voice rising to glass-shattering pitch. More guests continued arriving, creating a growing crowd of confused attendees. Some took pictures with phones. Others made calls trying to understand what was happening. A few had started leaving. Linda arrived by taxi at 12:15, stepping out in an expensive dress I was certain I had unknowingly paid for. She surveyed the chaos with genuine shock. Either she was an excellent actress or hadn't expected my cancellations to be so thorough. Sarah spotted Linda and rushed over. Even from distance, their body language told the story. Frantic gestures pointing at the venue, heated whispers. Linda's expression shifted from confusion to fear. At 12:30, with nearly 200 guests milling around in confusion and frustration, I decided it was time. I stepped out, straightened my suit, and picked up the manila folder. The walk across the street felt like the longest and shortest of my life. Every step brought me closer to a confrontation that would either vindicate me completely or destroy whatever remained of my relationship with Michael. As I approached, Many guests recognized me and began whispering. I felt something I hadn't experienced in 5 days, complete certainty. They had chosen this battlefield when they humiliated me publicly. Now they would face consequences publicly. Sarah saw me first. Her face went white, then red, then white again. She grabbed Michael's arm and pointed in my direction, mouth moving frantically. Michael turned and our eyes met across the crowd. I raised the manila folder slightly, just enough for him to see it, and smiled. The crowd parted as I walked through, conversations dying to whispers. Some guests looked relieved, probably assuming I was there to fix whatever disaster had befallen the wedding. Others looked uncomfortable, remembering the rehearsal dinner. Ladies and gentlemen, I called out, my voice carrying across the gathered crowd. I apologize for the confusion about today's ceremony, but I have important information to share that will explain everything. Sarah stepped forward, voice shaky but defiant. Ryan, you're not welcome here. We told you that already. I opened the manila folder and pulled out the first page of bank statements. Actually, Sarah, I think these 200 people deserve to know exactly why there's no wedding today. And more importantly, they deserve to know who's been paying for it all along. The crowd fell silent as I held up the bank statements. 200 faces turned toward me, expressions ranging from curiosity to uncomfortable anticipation. 5 days ago, at the rehearsal dinner, Sarah called me a pathetic excuse for a father. She said I was emotionally unavailable, controlling, and incapable of earning love. She told me I wasn't welcome at this wedding. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some guests nodded, remembering the incident. What Sarah didn't mention was that every single expense for this wedding came from my accounts. The venue, flowers, catering, photographer, everything. $87,000 of everything. Sarah's face went white. Ryan, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? I pulled out the first credit card statement. Let me share some transactions from the emergency credit card I gave Michael for wedding expenses. I read clearly. March 15th, Cartier, Michigan Avenue, $12,000. March 22nd, Nordstrom Oak Street, $8,000. April 3rd, the Peninsula Hotel, $3,000 for a weekend getaway. Michael stepped forward. Dad, what are you doing? I'm telling the truth. I looked directly at him. Did you buy a $12,000 watch from Cartier? Did you spend $8,000 at Nordstrom? Did you stay at the Peninsula when you told me you were visiting friends in Milwaukee? Michael's face crumpled. No, I never... Because Sarah made these purchases. Using credit card authorization she obtained by accessing my computer when she was supposedly showing me Pinterest boards. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Phones came out, people taking pictures, posting to social media. Sarah found her voice shrill and desperate. He's lying. He's a bitter old man who can't stand to see his son happy. Am I lying about this? I pulled out another document. A $28,000 wire transfer to Tuscany. Dream vacations for a honeymoon I thought I was secretly booking, except Sarah initiated the transfer, not me. Linda stepped forward. Ryan, that's enough. You've made your point. Have I, Linda? Because I haven't gotten to the best part yet. I pulled out transfer records. Every fraudulent charge Sarah made was followed by a transfer of exactly 30% to an account registered under Linda Caldwell's name. My ex-wife received a cut of every dollar Sarah stole. The crowd erupted. Gasps, exclamations, people turning to each other in shock. Someone shouted, "Call the police!" Linda went ashen. That's not... I didn't know. You didn't know... I held up printed emails. These are communications between you and Sarah planning not just the theft, but my public humiliation. Quote, once we destroy his relationship with Michael, we can access the accounts freely. Sarah lunged for the papers, but I stepped back smoothly. The conspiracy goes back 6 months, I announced. 6 months of systematic theft while they planned to destroy my relationship with my son. They used my love for Michael as a weapon against me. Michael stood frozen, his face a mask of horror. Sarah, is this true? Did you really steal from my father? Sarah's composure cracked completely. Michael, you don't understand. He was controlling us. He was using his money to manipulate our relationship. By paying for your wedding, Michael's voice was barely a whisper, by giving us everything we asked for. Ladies and gentlemen, I called over the chaos. I canceled this wedding because I was funding my own destruction. These women planned to humiliate me, steal from me, and isolate me from my son. I turned to Michael, my voice softer. Son, I hope someday you'll understand that everything I did was to protect you. The crowd was in uproar. Some guests leaving, others taking pictures, a few actually applauding. Sarah and Linda stood exposed, their conspiracy laid bare. Michael looked at me with tears in his eyes. Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I should have believed you. The chaos around us continued, but it felt like Michael and I were standing in the eye of a hurricane. The crowd's shouts and camera flashes faded as my son stepped toward me, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I should have listened to you. I should have seen what they were doing." I placed my hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension I had carried for 5 days finally release. "Michael, you were manipulated by experts. Sarah had been planning this for months." Behind us, Sarah was screaming at the dispersing crowd. "This is all lies. He's a controlling narcissist. Don't listen to him." But her voice was drowned out by 200 people who had just witnessed the most spectacular wedding disaster in Chicago social history. Some guests were calling Ubers, others taking selfies. A few approached me with sympathetic words. Linda had disappeared entirely, probably slipping away during Sarah's meltdown. "Dad," Michael said, wiping his eyes. "How did I not see it? All those shopping trips, expensive dinners, weekend getaways I thought she was paying for. How could I be so blind?" "Because you loved her," I said simply. "When we love someone, we want to believe the best." Sarah counted on that. Michael shook his head in disgust. "The things she said about you at the rehearsal dinner, I just stood there. I let her destroy you in front of everyone. You were confused and manipulated, but when I tried to explain, you chose to believe her over me. That hurt more than anything Sarah said." "I know, and I'll regret that forever." Michael's voice was thick with shame. "You've done everything for me since I was born. You worked yourself to exhaustion to give me opportunities, and I repaid you by letting my fiancé call you a pathetic excuse for a father." The crowd was thinning now, most guests realizing there would be no reception. A few lingered, hoping for more drama. "Michael, I need you to understand something," I said, looking into his eyes. "I didn't expose Sarah and Linda just for revenge. I did it to save you." Another year of marriage to her, and she would have destroyed not just my relationship with you, but your entire future. Michael nodded grimly. "What happens now? Do we press charges?" "My lawyer is handling that. But what matters most is that you're safe, that you can see clearly now." "I can see," he said firmly, "and I never want to see Sarah again." "Dad, I know I don't deserve it after what I put you through, but is there any chance we can rebuild what I destroyed?" I pulled my son into a hug, the first real embrace we had shared in months. "Michael, you're my son. You'll always be my son. We'll rebuild, and we'll be stronger than before." As we stood there reunited in the wreckage of what should have been his wedding day, I felt complete peace. The truth was out. The conspirators were exposed. My relationship with Michael was not just restored, but purified by fire. Sarah's voice faded as venue security led her away. The guests scattered to spread the story across Chicago's social networks. Linda was probably already planning her escape. But Michael and I were together again, and that was worth more than any wedding, any money, any revenge. "Come on, son," I said, putting my arm around his shoulders. "Let's go home." 6 months later, I stood in Lincoln Park on a crisp October morning, watching my son adjust his tie for the second time in a year. But this wedding was different in every way that mattered. The 30 guests surrounded us all, people who genuinely cared about Michael and his bride-to-be Emma Chen, a pediatric nurse he had met during his recovery. No designer gowns or elaborate arrangements, just simple elegance and real love. "Dad, thank you," Michael said as I helped him with his boutonniere, "for saving me from Sarah, for forgiving me, and for giving Emma your blessing." I saw a man who had grown tremendously. The naive boy who had been manipulated was gone, replaced by someone who recognized genuine love from calculated deception. Emma appeared beside us, radiant in a simple white dress she had bought for $300. She had insisted on paying for most wedding expenses herself. After Michael's experience, she understood the importance of financial independence and mutual respect. "Mr. Caldwell," she said warmly, "I'm grateful you protected Michael. If you hadn't exposed Sarah's lies, he might never have found real happiness." I hugged my future daughter-in-law. "Emma, welcome to our family. Please call me Dad." The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. A small pavilion surrounded by autumn trees. When they exchanged vows they had written themselves. There wasn't a dry eye among the witnesses. During the reception, I gave a speech. 6 months ago, I thought I was planning my son's wedding. What I was actually doing was preventing his destruction. Today, I'm witnessing something far more valuable. I'm seeing my son marry someone who loves him for exactly who he is. I looked at Michael and Emma. Real love doesn't demand financial proof. Real love doesn't require public humiliation of family. Real love builds up, it doesn't tear down. I raised my glass. to Michael and Emma, and to the truth that real love is always worth fighting for. Later, Michael pulled me aside. Dad, the charges were finalized yesterday. Sarah pled guilty to fraud and will serve 18 months. Linda agreed to pay full restitution and received probation. Justice had been served, but it felt less important now. What matters, I said, is that you're happy and safe. That's all I ever wanted. Michael smiled the same smile from when he was a little boy. I am Dad. For the first time in years, I'm genuinely happy. Driving home that night, I reflected on lessons learned. Sometimes protecting people we love requires being the villain in their story temporarily. Sometimes love means setting boundaries and refusing to enable destructive behavior. Most importantly, real family bonds survive anything when built on truth, respect, and genuine love. The fairy tale wedding I had originally planned was fantasy. This simple celebration of authentic love was reality, and reality was far more beautiful. Sometimes the people we love most will test our faith in ways we never imagined. Ryan's story reminds us that betrayal stories like these aren't just about money or manipulation. They're about the courage to stand for truth when everything seems lost. As my grandpa's stories always taught me, God has a way of revealing people's true hearts when we need it most. The Lord works in mysterious ways, and sometimes He allows us to face betrayal so we can discover our own strength. Ryan's journey shows us that protecting those we love sometimes means being willing to look like the villain. These betrayal stories teach us that real love requires boundaries, not endless enabling. My grandpa's stories from childhood always emphasize that God sees everything, even when we feel alone and abandoned. Ryan's faith in doing what was right, even when his own son turned against him, reflects the divine wisdom that guides us through our darkest moments. The Almighty has perfect timing. Sarah and Linda's conspiracy was exposed exactly when it needed to be. The most powerful grandpa stories are the ones that show us how God can restore what seems permanently broken. Ryan and Michael's relationship wasn't just repaired, it was made stronger through trials. These betrayal stories remind us that sometimes we must lose everything false to find everything true. The lesson here is profound, authentic love survives any storm when it's built on truth and respect. God's plan often includes painful revelations that ultimately lead to genuine healing and wisdom. What betrayal stories from your own life have taught you about the power of standing up for truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that remind us how faith and courage can transform our deepest wounds into our greatest victories.